This week on Capitol Report, election security getting a lot of attention from state lawmakers.
We need better policy in our elections so that we don't have the ability for crime to exist.
Whom should we interrogate?
Well, I don't know. You know, it could have been anybody.
The push to get Democrats to vote uncommitted in the Democratic primary.
And come April 2nd, they will feel our power.
Just watch out for the guns. They'll get you.
While a former Connecticut senator weighs in on our choices for November.
Oh, no. Don't make me choose between Trump and Biden again.
And I think the people should use it to vote for none of the above.
Plus, the debate over a bill to exterminate Connecticut's state insect.
A monster leaving a trail of carnage, spreading panic across a continent.
While Connecticut's leading lawmakers take a shot at a backup career. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Capitol Report starts now. Welcome to Capitol Report. I am Tom Dutchek. Happy St. Patrick's Day. We are so glad you're spending part of this St. Patrick's Day drinking your Guinness alongside the panel. The great Danielle Wong. You're in festive green today.
Good morning.
Good morning. Mayor of Bloomfield, Connecticut, Joe Airsimowitz, former Speaker of the House.
Yes.
You changed your tie this morning. You didn't come in with that tie.
I saw the green.
I got
This
called
green,
out.
what's in the green?
A happy high holy day to all who celebrate.
The voice of freedom, 94.9. Lee Elsey joined the panel this morning.
I'm the only one.
Yeah, you didn't get the memo. All right, guys, let's get into it. So one issue that we know will be sticking with us in the coming months, that's election security. Ballot fraud and threats against election officials are the focus of two new pieces of legislation and the heels of Bridgeport ballot drop box fiasco. Let's just say lawmakers on both sides of the aisle don't plan on dragging their heels any longer. It's just a matter of, well, how we fix the problem. Watch this.
It is quite robust, I believe, in addressing the issues that we saw arise in Bridgeport, and frankly, that people are concerned about more generally.
And we want to make sure that if there are, in fact, bad actors who have a history of going outside of the law, that they're not in charge of elections any longer.
Despite the fact that there have been several dozen people convicted of election fraud over the last several decades, no one has ever served any jail time.
Well, Lee, it seems like they're going to do something. What do you think?
Make it a felony, period. End of story. It stops. And you stop this stuff. One count felony. Every time you stuff a ballot box, it's a felony. People stop. You know, punitive action works. That's just the way I see it, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's how the bill's laid out. It does lay it out as a Class D felony. It's a good step. I think the frustration for many of us is, I know SEEK is very overworked and they have a lot of things, but these investigations have to speed up. It's a fine balance between investigating and coming up with a decision and just not doing anything. And it feels to the public that nothing's being done, and the frustration is evident.
And the Mayor, money's the issue. They're not sending you any extra money to do this work.
They aren't, and I agree with you that the enforcement violation process is very notoriously slow. And in order to increase the integrity, we need to put some meat around that, speed it up, which would impact the integrity of the elections for the better. But we're going to need resources in order to do that. And so one would argue also, so I hear you with the consequences of it, but I do understand the need for increased penalties to deter this bad behavior. But throwing non-violent offenders in overcrowded prisons, I don't think is the answer. So we have to be more thoughtful.
And Liz, I didn't hear anything about banning the drop boxes. There you go. Let's hear it.
Once again, we have an option here that's lipstick on a pig from the Democrats in charge in the legislature. This doesn't do anything to deter ballot harvesting. We're not addressing the issue with the drop boxes. They need to go because when you're talking about felonies and you're talking about punitive issues here, when you commit absentee ballot fraud through the mail, it is a federal offense. The feds get involved. You are prosecuted at the federal level. Right now, we take that completely off the table by allowing people not only to illegally ballot harvest, but they're able to go in and just drop them into the box without having to use the mail. So again, you're taking away a deterrent. And with all due respect, the reason we don't have money at SEEK to continue to look at these things is because of Dan Malloy. He completely stripped the agency of their ability to adjudicate these issues and to investigate them. So, you know, we have an opportunity here to fix that, but I don't think we're going to see anything change anytime soon.
Well, I think the balance, and it did come out of the 2017 budget, which did a lot of other good things, but we're facing that. Now there is money. We need to bolster that, or you partner them with a true investigatory agency that can do some of that work. But having investigations go on 6 months, a year, year and a half is good for nobody.
All right, happy St. Patrick's Day, Daniel Malloy. All right, so there's a movement afoot here in Connecticut and states around the country to vote uncommitted on their Democratic primary ballots. Activists see this as a way to protest President Biden's support for Israel as they demand a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The effort was a big success in Michigan, and last Wednesday, the Vote Uncommitted CT campaign brought together a diverse group to send their message to Connecticut Democrats. Watch this.
This effort here that we have comprised and are putting together here today is about hearing the voices of people across this country and the state who are not having their voices heard. Across all party lines, we see support for an immediate, long-lasting ceasefire at or above 50% across party lines.
Connecticut voters, including Jewish voters like me, are sending Biden a clear message in the Democratic primary. We reject his funding and fueling of Israel's genocide in Gaza. We are uncommitted on April 2nd to show our opposition to his deadly policies.
Little family squabble in the Democratic Party, guys. My Democratic friends, huh?
Yeah, look, anytime you go into the ballot box to have your voice be heard, I think it's powerful. I necessarily wouldn't do it this way. There's other ways to go about doing it. I think the message is out there. Biden is feeling the pressure, but they're expressing their viewpoints, and I'm all for it.
First, I think it's really important to say that there was a ceasefire before October 7th. Yeah. And to not acknowledge that and to not continue to remind people of that, to me, is really important. So I just feel like that needs to be said. And they're also not calling for the hostages to be returned to their families. There are 5 Americans still being held hostage. So I just think that's really important to mention. Look, 1 in 5 Democrat voters in Minnesota voted uncommitted. There's 20%. There are uncommitted delegates that are going to the Democrat convention. It will be really interesting to see how this plays out. You've got Working Families Party, NEA, National Education Association, a bunch of other unions who are internally voting against what the administration's policy is in Israel right now. And these are really important coalition members for Democrats. You are in trouble. If you're looking, go back to 2016, when there's apathy on the part of Democrat voters, you lose.
And I think we could both agree this presidential election is basically going to come down to 4 or 5 states. You know,
it always does.
It really is. And if those uncommitteds are there,
Michigan,
or a third party
Minnesota,
comes in.
Danielle, what does this say about the left of your party? Kind of like flexing his muscle here.
Well, I do want to level set that Biden has continuously demonstrated strong, overwhelming Democratic support time and time again to date in all primaries, right? But with that being said, a organized protest vote from the uncommitted is something to write home about, is something to the Biden campaign to take a close attention for, right? And so you're going to need to realize that. But everything that I've seen in the presidential campaigning from a Biden standpoint has made everyone realize that he is listening, he does hear it, and he is making concerted and intentional steps to respond to those uncommitted voting blocs.
All right, we'll get Leah in the next segment here. So speaking of voting in elections, former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman was back in the Nutmeg State recently based on a Biden-Trump rematch. He remains committed to the idea of a third-party unity ticket. Here he is at Quinnipiac quoting former President Thomas Jefferson about the issue. Watch this.
In this new country of ours, it will be a good thing to have a political rebellion every now and then. It'll be as important as storms are in the natural world. I thought that was a pretty elegant turn of phrase. I suppose he meant to get rid of the dead wood. And I think we're at a moment like that now.
So Lee, you know, in the opening clip, he said, you know, Biden versus Trump again. Jesus, there's no one better. What did your listeners say about this third-party issue?
It's sort of not an issue right now because there's not a charismatic candidate right now. I think if there was somebody who really grabbed the attention of people, you might see some movement. I think, though, what I thought was interesting, I think 2 decades ago, 33% of the people out there identified as independent or unaffiliated. Now it's up to half. So that is growing. You just need somebody to break the ice. You know, Lieberman's one of my favorite characters to listen to and sit down and talk with. I've had a number of conversations with him in the past. I think the country's ready for somebody to break this, break through that ceiling. I know this is a troubling year to choose Trump or Biden for folks who don't like them both or don't like either, but I see it coming. I do see somebody.
You got to have ballot access. You got to get on the ballot. So then the Republican Party, the Democratic Party has that pretty much well locked up in 50 states.
Well, and I just want to do a little bit of a PSA right now too, because a lot of folks I talk to that registered independent, they're like, oh, I just don't want to get the phone calls. Well, the reality is if you register, you get both because they're the fertile ground. And I think using the term the fertile ground for this election, it is something that is going to come. I do not believe it can happen at the presidential level first. It has to start rolling out in other areas, whether it's state. Municipal elections are a little tougher to do it at, but state elections, when you start to see it can be an effective strategy.
There's a third-party candidate in Stonington for selectmen.
Right.
There is, and in municipalities, very little chance. It's very hard because those Democrats or Republicans come out and 80% of the time they're going to vote for who their party nominates.
It'll be interesting to me to see an organization like the Working Families Party that has consistently cross-endorsed major Democrat nominees, if they have been aggressively anti-Israel, if they will flex their muscle and instead of cross-endorsing Democrats, if they will go out and put their own candidates on the ballot at the legislative level, at the congressional level, and if they continue to build that, to your point.
All right, guys, up next on Capital Report, who better to discuss TikTok with than the kid? Newsday's political contributor, Mike Cerulli, will touch that and some other things happening at the state capitol. When we get back, don't go away. Kid.
What does Mike have against the Irish?
This ain't Texas.
Senate Majority Leader Bob Duff taking to TikTok, no words, to spread the word about his party's work on abortion, but not all of Duff's fellow Democrats are down with TikTok. House Representatives overwhelmingly passed a bill that clears the way for the Fed to either ban or force the sale of the social media giant. Joining us to break down what this all means, Newsday's political contributor, my pal, Mike Cerulli. Hey, Mike, did Connecticut's Democratic members of Congress vote to ban TikTok? Which ones did that?
Good morning, Tom. Connecticut's House members were actually pretty split on this one. Rosa DeLauro and Joe Courtney both voted yes. Jim Himes, Johanna Hayes, and John Larson voted no. Senators Blumenthal and Murphy hadn't had a chance yet to vote on the bill, but Blumenthal told NBC News he's inclined to support it. Murphy has said he's open to it, but he'd rather see Congress focus on more robust protections for children online.
So, Mike, help us out here. What are the arguments here? As a boomer, I'm inclined to say, get this stuff away from the kids. What do you think?
Well, let's just separate for a moment the differences between broad concerns about social media, some of what you just outlined there, versus specific concerns about TikTok. And when it comes to those TikTok-specific concerns, you can really boil it down into one word: China. Lawmakers are concerned about espionage and privacy threats posed by TikTok's Chinese ownership. And this is a concern held by none other than Rosa DeLauro. She said in a pretty strong statement that TikTok is, quote, dangerous to our national security and our democracy. On the other hand, Jim Himes argues that shutting down social media platform is not what democracies do. It's what authoritarians do. That's what Jim Himes said. And remember, he has access to the nation's most sensitive intelligence, so he understands the threats here, but he argues that the United States can address the threats of TikTok without jeopardizing free expression.
Yeah, Himes is a pretty prolific tweeter. Is he on TikTok, Mike?
Yeah, he is a pretty prolific tweeter. He's not personally on TikTok. He's had a campaign account in the past, but many Connecticut politicians are. We saw Bob Duff at the top there, Jillian Gilchrist, Matt Blumenthal, Kate Farrar, our own Danielle Wong are among the most active Democrats on the platform. Republicans less active on TikTok, but they have been experimenting with short-form video on Instagram. Joe Paletta made a pretty good reel last week advertising a hearing on election integrity. And look, all this underscores a key point and almost a contradiction. TikTok might be perceived as a threat by many, but it is by far the most effective platform for reaching young people. And politicians might not want to pass that up in an election year, even as they consider banning the app altogether.
Yeah, Mike, the voice of freedom here, Lee Elsey, we were talking about it off camera. He was against it. And now, being the voice of freedom, I think he wants to let people make their own decision. News 8's political contributor and Gen Z, the great Mike Cerulli. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Great to be here, Tom.
Up next on Cap Report, a Pentagon budget cut sinking hopes about sub-building work that was expected to be here in Connecticut. The details when we get back. Don't get away. Brack, you got to break. Yeah, Brack, baby. Brack, baby. Brack. That's it. The Pentagon dropped a bomb last week when it decided to cut in half the number of submarines it will be building next year under the so-called AUKUS Pact. The construction of only one new Virginia-class sub is being funded under the president's budget. Despite the pact between the U.S., U.K., and Australia, Congressman Joe Courtney, who represents southeastern Connecticut, which is home to General Dynamics Electric Boat Shipyard, spoke to News 8 about what happens now. Watch this.
The committee process is, now just starting to rev up, and it's challenging because it's a big shift to put that sub back in the budget. But my, discussions with members just in the last three days after the budget came over have been actually very positive. So, but it's a lot of work ahead, and it's going to take a while.
As for the impact this has on electric boat and the work that's going on there, here's what Courtney had to say about that. Watch this.
Having a strong, consistent signal for procurement is the way to make sure that hiring stays steady, and also the smaller companies that provide supply chain technology for the company also stay strong. And that's really where I think you're going to see a lot of the debate in the coming months.
Yeah, my bet's on Joe. When I spoke to him about this issue and mocked the fact that we're going to have to start calling him One Sub Joe, One Sub Joe, he did say this happened during the Trump administration, and they were able to get the second boat. So, Lee, how's it?
No, you beat me to the One Sub Joe.
Well, I am the host.
We got to find money for submarines. I mean, China's outpacing us, ships and subs. Find it. We find money for everything else. Let's find money for the military. I think that's pretty simple.
Yeah, look, and I think Representative Courtney did say it's an uphill fight, but I have to say Southeast Connecticut really is lucky to have him. He's one of the nicest guys, and he really works across party lines to really put forward issues for his district. If anybody can do it, I think he can. But you're right. It's something that needs to be done. It's about our security. It's about priorities. We have to prioritize.
Back to Brack a little bit, but one of the things that we talked about during that process when we were talking about realigning our military and what we were going to need, we're facing global threats from China, Russia, and Iran. And so are our allies. And that's what makes this so critical. Submarines are one of the most critical pieces of keeping the free world free. And so it's important that that's part of the conversation when we're talking about our priorities. Obviously, we've seen cuts to the Army budget as well that's impacted helicopter production. So the defense industry obviously has a huge economic impact in Connecticut, but we really need to be thinking about the global threats that we face. And Australia is an important partner in that. And I know Japan is going to be part of the conversation too.
This trickles down to housing issues, job training issues, and a whole myriad of issues that rules into this.
That's absolutely correct. And so I hear the importance of making sure that from keeping up with China on the technological advances is absolutely important. But coming full circle back down to the ground, as a local leader, what I'm concerned about is sending that strong signal, as the congressman said, in regards to procurement and supply chain, because it's not just putting people to work and creating pathways of careers, but it's the housing component, it's investments in our economic development, investments in our local infrastructure. Right. It's a holistic approach that we want to see and plan out, not just in the few years ahead, but in the next 10 to 20 years. And if DC doesn't send a strong signal back to the local communities, it's really going to be hard for our local leaders to plan accordingly.
Yeah, and I think your whole campaign was called Save Our Sub Base, right? Like, we need to save the subs. It's workers, it's money, it's our economy.
I don't think anybody disagrees with that, right? I think to your point about bipartisanship, I think everyone needs to be working towards that because it's the right thing for national defense, right? In the big picture, that's what this is for. This is obviously important to the economy, but more importantly, to national and international security, we need a good sub-force.
All right, guys. Up next on Cap Report, the battle lines are being drawn at the state capitol over the future of the state insect. Oh, to be a fly on the wall for this debate. When we get back, don't go away.
It really bugs me.
It bugs me, too. It really bugs me.
Who are they suggesting?
Well, since 1977, the Connecticut state insect has been the praying mantis. When a group of kids from Vernon lobbied lawmakers to make it happen. Well, fast forward 47 years later, it was a good run. And now another group of students is itching for a new insect that would better represent Connecticut. One is the autumn meadowhawk dragonfly that you see right here. The other candidate is the spring azure butterfly. I got to tell you, these kids did the homework. When it was time to address lawmakers about why they are pushing the switch, they said this. Watch this.
Ultimately, we collected 1,889 votes across the state, overwhelmingly selecting the spring azure as a preferred state insect. The spring azure, like Connecticut, is energetic and small. It is one of the first butterflies to emerge in spring, and its azure color is a reminder of the colors of our state flag and many of our state's colleges and universities, including UConn, CCSU, and Yale. In fact, the Connecticut state flag was first described as being made of azure blue silk.
Man, if I'm the mountain laurel, man, I'm looking over my shoulder. I mean, if I'm the sperm whale, you know, the almondine garnet. I mean, what's next? This is crazy.
That was a persuasive argument.
Come on.
It really was. And the praying mantis's mating habits scare me a little bit, so I'm all with the butterfly.
So in the few bugs, they can rotate their head 180 degrees. Come on.
We
talked about this on your program last week, and somebody mentioned the bumblebee, and I wrongly said, well, that can sting. And apparently, thanks to one of your listeners, they don't sting.
Yeah.
But that was a very compelling.
That's going to do it for the mayor, the coach, Lizzie, the voice of
Lee.
I'm making it.
He's going to make it.
All the St. Patty's Day fans.
Oh, it's close.
I get a second shot.
No, you don't.
Oh.